Alright guys, William here back with a new video, and in this video we're back with another recasting video, this time for Big Brother Canada, I guess, where, again, I've never done a BBCAN recasting video. To be fair, there's not much recasting to do for BBCAN. However, this is one I've had in the back burner for a little bit, kind of just an idea I wanted to do, to where, well, again, don't know how good this idea really turned out, I still wanted to talk through it, and that is recasting BBCAN5 if it was All Stars. Where obviously BBCAN5 is the only season of the show to have major focus on returnees, it being the only season with half the cast being returnees, to where, again, this will be a recasting video to say what the cast could have been if it was all returnees. Now, technically, I do believe that this season probably was intended to be an all-star season initially, and they just simply couldn't get the people that they wanted to and kind of reduced it back to what we eventually got. But still, either way, we'll still be going through each of the casts of BBs 1 through 4 and talk about who I think would have made the cast in a situation like this. Not necessarily saying that this is a realistic cast, as again, I think if it was a realistic cast, this would have just been the cast. Then just in general, there's a couple people on this cast that I know fundamentally would not have been on this season due to certain issues. But again, I still want to go through what an all-star cast at this point could have potentially looked like. So with that, let's start off talking about BBCAN1, where in general, I do feel like there's actually a good amount of contenders from BBCAN1. I think there's a lot of big names for the show here, to where while on the actual BBCAN5, we only got one returnee from this season, I feel like there are a decent amount of people here that production could bring back. Now, for the people I did not end up putting on here, I did not put on the likes of a Neil, who I would have liked to see back, though. Again, I just think it's very unlikely he would make a full-blown all-star season. Liza is someone I considered here. Someone that was pretty prominent in the community at this point, a very controversial figure in the community, where I think this would have been a bit of a messy pick to bring back, though a fun one, but again, did not make my cut. I considered Topaz, who obviously had that iconic moment of her messing up the vote at the end, though I really don't know how much interest there really was in bringing her back, or she never felt like one of the more popular characters from this season. Also, I considered both members of the Shield, though obviously Peter is more of a true contender, and straight up, I thought Peter would make the cut coming into this, where Peter was obviously a big name. I mean, he was someone that hosted the sideshow, and through that, again, you would think he would make the cut here, especially considering his fellow co-host was an actual member on the BBCAN5 cast. However, I felt like just in terms of the slots on this cast, I feel like it was kind of tough to really squeeze him in here. Also, I did end up considering Andrew, who I've always found to be a somewhat interesting character, though straight up, I think by this point, Andrew was already kind of off people's radars, so he didn't make it on. So people that did make it on, I mean, straight up, just going to spoil this right now, it's essentially just the top 4. So first up, I got Tala, and again, Tala is someone that I think was a big character on the show, someone that they clearly loved on the show, and it's someone that made some guest appearances after season 1, to where I think Tala definitely would have been high on the list of people to bring back at this point, especially when trying to get this like more wacky character for the show, to where while we definitely have a good amount of casting choices here that will bring drama to the show, I feel like they still want this kind of more Dodo-y figure for the show, and I feel like Tala kind of perfectly fits into that. So again, I end up putting her on. I also end up putting on Emmett, obviously, to where again, I think he would have been one of the bigger locks on the board. However, this is kind of what I was mentioning earlier, to where again, Emmett could not be on the show. To where, again, I assume at least, one of the major reasons why he was not on BBCAN5 is because he was still under contract by Amazing Race Canada, to where that had filmed somewhat recently at that point, to where, again, he was not allowed to be on BBCAN5, to where, obviously, again, he would not be allowed to be on this season. However, obviously, if they could have him, I assume that they would want to have him. Again, he would made an appearance on pretty much every other season of the show at this point. Again, he was just such a staple of these early seasons, to where, and I feel like Emmett would have been such a major lock on this season. So again, I put him on. Also a major lock, someone that was on the actual BBCAN5, we got Gary. And again, no way they don't have Gary on this cast. Again, Gary's such a fan favorite at the time, to where mixing out the fact that he's also just such a unique character for the show, and someone that, again, got robbed of a win on his first season. I feel like there's almost no reason to not bring Gary back in this spot. So again, easily made the cast. The other person was, again, the one I debated about the most. However, it ends up being the winner of the season. We got Jillian. And again, like Emmett, she would not be available to be on the season. She would not be allowed due to contracts. And really, at the end of the day, I'm not even like a big Jillian fan. I don't think she's the most riveting TV in the world. However, I do think having back your first ever winner, especially a winner that won due to very controversial means, I think is a very interesting story for a return. Again, someone that won in the game by accident, and seeing them try to have this like redemption story on the return again, I think is a really interesting reason to bring her back here. Now, I'm not the most entertained by her, and really I do think when we're going from a more entertainment standpoint, I think there are so many other potential people I would rather see back. However, again, I just feel like that storyline and her also being, again, the first winner of the show is enough to make her an interesting pick to bring back here, which is why she made my final cut. Next up, moving on to BBCAN5, to where I also have 4 people making this cast, which I should also just mention. I actually ended up including 4 people from each of these casts, where again, it's kind of equally split in that way, which wasn't necessarily on purpose, though I do think it works for better that is the case. But as for contenders from this cast, I would love to see Pop and Paul Jackson back. I think that would be so funny. Yeah, obviously, I think there's very little chance of that happening, so he didn't make it on. I also consider Sarah, who was, again, another one that was like a pretty major figure in the community at this point, someone that seemed to be close to all the alumni and still made appearances here and there, to where Sarah, I think, would have been consideration. Yeah, I think there's other pre-jurors that would be high on their radars over her, so again, I did not put her on. I very much considered Arlie. I really wanted Arlie to make this cut. Yeah, I feel like it's a spot where I don't feel like there's really a spot for him, to where I think archetype-wise, there's someone that was a much more bigger priority from a production point of view. To where while I personally would have liked to see Arlie back, I just did not feel like he was that likely for this cast. Also, I did consider Allison, to where again, I personally would love to see Allison play again. And her again being given a really raw deal on her original season of her being added late and having to face so much adversity. And again, the fact that she actually made it as far as she did and actually came extremely close to pulling off a massive move in the game, I think is very impressive, though. And at the end of the day, I don't think she was particularly high on people's radars either, so again, she did not make it on. I also considered Adele, and Adele was somewhat close to making it on here. I mean, Adele was a fan favorite during BBCAN2, and is a pretty notable character with him constantly yelling, "Wake up, Canada," though I think at the end of the day, again, there's just other people that take the priority over him. Yet again, he was someone that was definitely in consideration. Also, I did consider Heather, to where Heather is someone that also had a great storyline on this season, someone that was a notable underdog on this season, someone that, again, was somewhat close to making it on here. Yeah, I just feel like there's other women that are more priorities. Someone that I really wanted to put on this cast, I didn't just do us knowing that she said no, is Sabrina, where again, we know Sabrina turned down the season. Where, again, she was actually supposed to be on the real BBCAN5, but said no. Again, I could have obviously still put her on here despite that. Yeah, again, I feel like the fact that we have a very clear, definitive answer for just saying no to the season, I think kind of makes me just want to pick other people over her that are more realistic to make the cut. So again, she did not make it on. As for people that did make it on, obviously you got to have Ica, where obviously Ica makes the actual BBCAN5, and again, when we expand the cast even more, again, very clearly she still makes the cut. I think she's someone that production clearly loved at the time. I mean, her shredding the letters was looked at as one of the most iconic moments in the history of the show up to that point, and just in general, she was just such an incredible character for the show, where while she was a very bad player in her original run, I do feel like she again just came off as a really captivating character for the show, to where again, very easy pick there. Next person, someone that I do wonder if this person would have said no. I think their careers were starting to pop off around this time, though it's still someone that I think production very much liked, and that person is Kenny. And again, for me, Kenny is a bit of a question mark here. Again, I definitely could have put on Arlie or Adele over him. Yeah, I did put on Kenny just because I feel like Kenny, again, was such a major character on this season. So clearly it was a production favorite, though. I do wonder, again, the fact that he wasn't on the actual BBCAN5, does that mean he probably turned it down? I think that's very likely. However, I do think of the other men that were in consideration for BBCAN2, I do think he was the most likely to make it on outside of the obvious other person, where again, I did end up picking him for this cast. Though again, I think there's definitely a world where you swap him out for Arlie, definitely a world where you swap him out for Peter, or even swap him out for people later in this list. But again, I decided that considering how major of a character he was on this season, I decided to still leave him on this. Next person, again, someone that was one of the biggest locks on the board, you gotta have Netta. And obviously Netta was on the actual BBCAN5, and again, there's no reason to think she wouldn't be on this. Again, she was a massive figure for the show. Again, clearly this, like, you should have won person for BBCAN was constantly talked about as the best BBCAN player of all time in the lead up to BBCAN5, and again, just had a lot of hype for her coming back for BBCAN5, to where, again, I think it's very clear she would be back in this spot, easily makes it on. And the other person to bring on ends up being the winner of the season, that is John Party. And again, this is another one, not really a debate. I think John definitely would have wanted to come back, and has always reiterated that he would come back to the show, and is someone that obviously was a massive fan favorite. I mean, he was clearly adored by Canada on this season. He also, again, kind of just epitomizes like what you would expect Canada to like from a character, and him coming from a rural area of the country while also providing humorous character moments, and him also being very good at challenges, to where again, I think John brings a lot to the table. Now, I think it would be actually interesting to see him on this cast with Netta, where this is post their breakup. While they were still friends after the fact, I feel like that would have been a very weird situation to see play out on the feeds, though I still feel like John, again, is very likely for this cast. So again, he easily made it on. Next up for BBCAN5, and this ends up being one where I ended up considering a lot of early boots from this season, where you got someone like a Neha, who was obviously this person that was talked about as being this robbed player, though again, I felt like there were other priorities here. I also considered Johnny, who was also another person that was pretty active in the community at this point, though again, I just did not think made the cut. Also, Jordan Parhar was someone that was very active in the community at this point. I mean, this is the point where he hosted the Happy Hour and was clearly friends with a lot of the alumni, though again, he did not make the cut. Also, someone that didn't make the cut is actually the first person that is a change from the actual BBCAN5 cast. I did not put on Cindy. Now, obviously, she is on the real cast, and obviously, I do think they wanted Cindy. It's not like they didn't want Cindy. However, I just feel like when looking at the full board, I feel like there's 2 other women from this cast. I think that they would have wanted more, and while obviously it's very realistic, one of them in particular said no, I still look at it, for me, as someone that I just look at that other person as a much more interesting returning in my mind. So again, I didn't put Cindy on. And the same thing goes with the next person I'm going to mention, which is Bruno. I did not put Bruno in this cast, despite the fact that he obviously is on the actual BBCAN5, to where again, I think there's just another interesting returnee to have over him here, to where, again, as much as I actually was really excited to see Bruno play again, I think he really got screwed on BBCAN3. I was actually really shocked at the fact that he got to play again, where I really did not think that he was particularly high on production's radars, where again, him getting called back again was a surprise to me. I didn't put him on, and I also did not put on Ashley, who is someone that, again, considered here. Realistically, I do think the likes of like a Heather, or obviously Cindy, is more likely than Ashley, but Ashley still, again, play solid game. Ozzy made it very deep into the game. Would at least be in consideration, though I didn't put her on. But as for the people I did put on here, obviously, first up, the only BBCAN3 person that made the actual cast that still remains on this cast is Kevin Martin. Where, well, I personally wasn't like the biggest Kevin Martin fan after BBCAN3. I mean, it's very clear the production loved him. He's also someone that was a casual fan favorite, to where I think it does make a lot of sense that they would bring Kevin back for this season. With him kind of perfectly fitting into this like super fan role. But again, him kind of taking the spot from like someone like an Arlie or someone like a Peter. So again, I think Kevin was higher on their radars at this point. Also, the person I put on, again, essentially in place of Cindy, I did put on Brittany, to where, again, I think there's definitely a world where Brittany was called for BBCAN5 and probably turned it down, but I really didn't want to have the exact same cast again. So, again, I put Brittany on. I think Brittany is someone that, again, I think was such a fan favorite on this season, someone that literally got handed a coup d'etat to really shake up the game, and one that I think was largely remembered by production, where, again, while Cindy obviously made the actual cut for BBCAN5, I thought Brittany is someone that had more of a lasting impact for me at this point in the show's run, where, again, I put Brittany on. Also, the person I put on essentially in place of Bruno is Godfrey. And the fact that Godfrey wasn't on BBCAN5 is still mind-boggling to me, to where I don't know if he turned it down. I don't know if some wires got crossed and just something happened to make him not be on the cast. But again, the fact that Godfrey didn't make the BBCAN5 cast is genuinely insane to me, to where I think it's very easy swapping him out for Bruno, to where while Bruno, again, I thought had a lot of potential after his first run, I did feel like Godfrey had more of an interesting storyline on the return. Obviously came so close to winning, played in a very dynamic way, and I think just seeing him be able to play again would have been very interesting. So again, easily made the cut here. And the final person I put on is obviously the winner of the season, is Sarah, where obviously Sarah was a massive fan favorite at this point, and I think if you're including winners, outside of her saying no, I think there's no way that she would not have been on this cast. Again, she was such a fan favorite here. Obviously ends up replacing Gary on the sideshow, to where she was obviously, again, very high on production's radars, with her also just being a very different archetype from a lot of the other women that were cast here, to where, again, I think Sarah just perfectly fits into this cast, so she easily made it on. And with that, we then move on to BBCAN4, where this ends up being a bit of a strange one, where I don't think BBCAN4 nowadays would be particularly high on the radar for me in terms of returnee seasons. Yeah, obviously this is immediately after BBCAN4, and because I do think there would be a few more picks than normal. Now, people that did not make it on, I did not put on Dallas, where obviously Dallas ends up making the actual BBCAN5 cast. Yeah, again, I think in this spot, I would not put him on. I think it's a shock that he was even on to begin with. And, well, again, obviously that could be just a ramification of them not being able to get some of these bigger names that they wanted to get. Again, I don't have confirmation on who turned it down, who didn't, so screw it. I'm not going to put Dallas on. I'm going to put someone else on instead. Now, beyond that, again, we know Ramses turned down the season, where I would not personally consider Ramses, but it seemed like they wanted Ramses for whatever reason. But again, he turned it down, so thank God. Also, I did consider someone like Maddie, who I actually thought was a pretty messy player her first time around, was kind of interesting. Though, again, simply did not make the cut. I also considered someone like Jared, who, again, was really boring, but at least was a big presence on just the previous season. Though, again, I didn't put him on because obviously Emmett kind of takes his role. I also considered Nikki Graham, who would have been great to see on back-to-back seasons. And again, it was essentially fighting with the Tala spot, though I do think, considering, again, Tala is obviously from the first season and also, again, is actually Canadian. I feel like when you have that debate between these two in the similar archetype, I feel like they probably would lean Tala. Also, I would have considered Joel, who obviously fits into this like nerdy archetype, though very different than someone like a Kevin Martin, though I think a bit more similar to someone that did make the cut here, to where I feel like only one of those two should probably make the cut, especially considering they're from the same original season, and work together, to where, again, I decided to go with the other person instead of Joel here. Also, I consider Kelsey, obviously, the runner-up from this season. Again, not a person that would have been consideration. I think probably in more consideration if I didn't put someone like Jillian on the cast. Yeah, I think with Jillian being the original winner, I think that's a much more interesting storyline, where, again, I didn't put Kelsey on. And also, I did not put on Nick or Phil on this cast, where, again, they are the only winners to not make this final cast. And yeah, I think it kind of makes sense that that's the case. Obviously, they're not particularly popular in their original season, where the only reason they would have made this cut is simply because they are winners. And I did contemplate like putting one of them on separately, like putting just Nick on, but also it's like, I don't know, do I need Nick on this cast? I feel like Nick's not particularly interesting, where I just thought it was better just to leave them off, considering, again, I don't really have much of an interest in seeing them ever again. For the people that did make the cut, the first one is a bit of a strange choice here. Again, it's definitely more of a second chance candidate than someone that should be a pure all-star. Yeah, it's someone that I do think I would have been very high on at this point in BBCAN history, and that person is Levita. And Levita obviously was a very early boot. She was someone that had a very messy run on the season, someone that was just instantly on the outs from the very beginning after a pretty terrible HOH reign, and then starts to gain some traction in the game until she's sniped out during the double. So again, I think Levita did not have the greatest run on this season. Yeah, I think there was like a level of potential there, and I think she was still someone that, again, was a messy player, could lead the drama. I feel like she ended up being someone that I would have liked to see back, and I think, again, immediately after her original season was kind of a good spot for it. So again, I decided to put her back here. Another person I decided to put on, again, essentially in the spot of Dallas, I decided to put on Mitch. Now, I think there's 100% chance that Mitch turned down BBCAN5. I think that's definitely a high probability, but I think Mitch is someone that, again, I personally like. I thought he brought an interesting dynamic to the show, again, him being this super fan that was able to play this like really like under a radar mastermind sort of game, where, again, the fact that he was under radar is maybe a reason why he wouldn't be cast for something like this, though at the same time, he also had a very notable speech when getting evicted that BBCAN likes to play over and over again over BBCAN's history. Or again, I think that's something that does up his legacy, to where, again, I think they would have wanted Mitch. Again, I expect he probably turned BBCAN5 down. Yeah, again, let's live in the world where he would have said yes, to where, screw it, I decided to put him on. So obviously, again, someone that made the actual BBCAN5 cast was such a lock for this cast. That person's Cassandra. I mean, there's no doubt Cassandra was going to be on this cast. I mean, again, she came out of BBCAN4 being such a popular player, was obviously just such a massive character, and someone that really felt like the new hotness for the show, to where, again, just felt like a very clear pick for her to be on this cast. And the final person to make this BBCAN cast here is someone that, again, don't know if this person could have done this season. I also don't know if they were willing to pay up for having this person on this season, but screw it, I went with them anyway, and that person is Tim Dormer. And obviously Tim, even being on BBCAN4 was already this like big twist that they went out of their way to cast him for. Flew him out from Australia, and straight up, don't know if they would have been willing to do that again for a returnee season. Yeah, again, I think it would have been a great casting choice. Now, obviously, Tim does quit at the end, and that's not particularly great, but I still think they very much liked him, and I think they would have been willing to bring Tim back. And considering, again, he was pretty much the main character of just the previous season, I still think he would have been pretty high on their radars, to where I think the only thing really stopping it is, again, the fact that he's not Canadian, and through that, would they want him on a BBCAN All-Star season, along with the fact that he also, again, would require more money for him to be on the cast, to where I think those are things that definitely could stop him from being on the cast. Yeah, again, I just think he's such a unique character, one that was such a major character on just the last season of the show, to where, again, I decided to put him on. But with that, again, that is my recasting for BBCAN5 if it was All-Stars. And running through the people that made the cut from BBCAN1, I have Jillian, Gary, Emmett, and Tala. From BBCAN2, I have John, Netta, Kenny, and Ika. From BBCAN3, I have Sarah, Godfrey, Brittany, and Kevin. And from BBCAN4, I do have Tim, Cassandra, Mitch, and Levita. To where, again, I think this is a pretty strong cast. I think this is a cast that, again, I would have been very excited for if we actually got it at the time. To where, again, I know I was at the time very much expecting an all-star season with pretty much around this grouping of people. To where, obviously, we didn't get that, but obviously what we got was a good season anyway, so I guess it doesn't really matter. But obviously, again, very remiss the fact that we never got a BBCAN all-star season. But anyway, I mean, that's the video. I mean, probably the only only recasting video I'll ever do for BBCAN, as again, there's not really many other options unless I just want to recast BBCAN 12 of his All-Stars, I guess, just for the sake of it. But yeah, I'm not looking at recasting videos for BBCAN as being particularly likely to do down the road yet. Obviously, I'll just continue to do the same style content you expect from the channel. Again, more Survivor and Big Brother videos. I'll definitely do recasting videos of Big Brother and Survivor seasons down the road. But obviously, that ends up being it for this recasting video. Thank you for watching.